Awesome. So my name is Harry Madusha, and I'm the president of IBA Nova Scotia, and I'm glad to be introducing today's webinar. Um, Let me just bear with me a little bit. Yeah. So I'm glad we have our speakers in-house, and they're going to be talking about the fearless and unapologetic diagramming. I am so curious to know what dimension they're going to be coming from. I know they are sought out speakers, and I'm very sure that we're going to learn a lot. For me, I'm the president, but I also have my director of professional development here, and I'll be handing over to her so she can do some of the introductions. Then we can get Laura and Colin to start the presentation. If you have any questions, I don't know how Colin and Laura would prefer, but I think maybe you can just keep your questions to the end of the presentation and post them in the chat so you don't forget, and we'll just take them one at a time. However, if Laura and Colin prefer to take it while they're talking, they'll let us know, but that's usually what we do. And also would have a replay of this on YouTube, and you can always go there to watch and also share with your friends. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of value from today, so I'm sure it is something that will be very interesting to share with others. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Oluwakemi. In short, I call her Kemi. She's the Director for Professional Development, and she will take it over from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harry. Good day, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. It is my pleasure and my greatest pleasure, I'll say, to welcome everyone to this wonderful event and webinar. We have two amazing speakers in our midst this evening here. So I'm just going to go through their bio briefly before I hand over to them. So bio for Colin Christabel is an endless, curious business analysis practitioner for over 20 years. She has a passion for delivering the right solutions to customers. Colin's current role is that of a functional analyst at Simon's Food. She's also driven to support others in their pursuit of analysis excellence. As we can see today, she participates as a volunteer and former staff member of the IIBA, which is the reason why she's been here, been a part of us, and she's so proud to be associated with anything IIBA. She's a VP of marketing of the Northwest Arkansas IIBA chapter, and she also have her blogs at http, that's www.analysisrocks.com. I will drop that in the chat. Please go and check her out. So that's for Colin. And for Laura, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. And we're so fortunate to have you in our midst this evening. Laura is currently a principal product manager with Walmart Incorporated. I believe everybody knows Walmart. Good. In the total rewards domain, specifically supporting benefit system for over 1.6 million US-based employees. That must be huge. With over 20 years experience, she fell in love with visual modeling and other representations of business requirements ever since she was asked to draw me a picture. We know how that starts. And that was over a decade ago. Laura currently serves our local BA community as the president of Northwest Arkansas IBA chapter. And in her free time, she likes to play trivia with friends at local restaurants and is a bit obsessed with solitary. Without much ado, I'll welcome to the podium Laura and Christabel. Please, you can have the floor. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Harry, if you could stop sharing, I will go ahead and share my screen and get that going in presentation mode. All right, can everybody see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. So had a little fun here with our title slide. And we don't necessarily let the rules get in our way either. So we will proceed forward with our fearless and unapologetic diagramming. I think we kind of covered our bios. You guys covered it very well. So, I'm Laura and this is Colleen. And we've got a few years of experience, so we're here to share what we've learned, and we'll go from there. So, Colleen, you want to kick things off with what we'll be talking about tonight?
Sure. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I was a little bit late joining. I apologize for that. Sure. So the thing that you're going to hear me say an awful lot this presentation, and probably Laura too, is really about knowing your audience and how important that is, above all, really. Rules, bending and breaking them. Talk a little bit about how we got here today and how breaking rules was one of the things that we got us here today. Talk about a couple of different kinds of diagrams that you can use, including context diagrams. We've got process models we can go over, timelines and roadmaps, decision tables. These are all tools that you can use. And then we'll talk about how there's templates and things you can use, but maybe you don't want to use them and maybe you do. So we'll talk about those kinds of things.
So you've heard, go ahead.
Yeah. Pictures worth 1,000 words. I know everybody's heard that phrase. And it's kind of true. I mean, in one thing that we hear a lot is that 65% of people are visual learners. So what that really means is a picture is going to last longer and you're going to remember it better than you will a whole lot of text, right? And really, if you think about it, and like we can actually move on to the next slide, but in a couple slides too, you'll see what we really mean by that. This is just kind of showing that, as far back as Leonardo da Vinci, we've talked about how a picture can convey meaning. So I love his quote about a poet would be overcome by sleep and hunger before being able to describe with words what a painter is able to depict in an instant. I love that quote because it's so true. But Napoleon said it, all kinds of people. It's a concept that's been around for a long time. So I'm gonna turn this one over to Laura because she does a really good job describing the difference between text and pictures.
Sure. I actually did a bit of an experiment and asked Walmart's internal Gen AI tool, my assistant, to give me a really long description of a rainbow. And you can see on the left that, this is what it came back with. And I'm not going to go through and read that. You can kind of take a look at it there. Very long, very detailed, but the picture, I think, captures it more elegantly. Like it's a better depiction of what we're trying to show than all those words. It's trying to show everything in all the detail, but could we just use this picture? It's not exactly a one-for-one, comparison. And there are times where you do need the text. Some people with visual impairments use screen readers, and they would need a better representation of what's in the picture using text. And in some cases, there's legal or compliance reasons for why you can't just get away with using a graphical depiction or some type of a picture. But in a lot of cases, it might be easier and quicker to come to a shared understanding than paragraphs of text. And similarly, we've got another example here of the Mona Lisa, and then 3 paragraphs of text describing that picture on the screen. And, you know, which is more effective, which is capturing the essence of what we're trying to see more effectively. And essentially, we're just trying to say it's more impactful and efficient to just see the painting directly.
So to kind of jump into this next piece, which we're going to start talking about the actual techniques, I want to tell you a little bit about how I got to this point. When I started working at a job long ago, we were given, as business analysts, we were given a set of templates and a set of criteria that we had to follow for every project that we ever got involved in. And it had a lot of notation in it. And not only was everything that we did, every project that we did, scrutinized by somebody else, a peer review group, but we were actually marked down and it was counted against us in our reviews and things like that if we didn't use the proper notation and the proper picture and didn't have everything exactly right in our requirements package. And so there was a lot of fear that I developed about, oh my gosh, am I going to get this wrong? Am I going to not get a raise this year because I forgot to do the right box on a chart? Kind of a situation. And so, I was looking for ways to make things easier. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about was UML, Unified Modeling Language. Lucidchart gives, Lucidchart even says a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that's why Unified Modeling Language is created. Okay, to form a common visual language. Well, that's what it's about, right? We need to have some kind of a diagram that we can all agree what it's depicting. And so therefore, Unified Modeling Language came out. Awesome. Sounded great to me. Until I realized, if we could flick to the next slide, it's really quite complicated. It might be unified, but you know, there's different kinds of diagrams that you can do, and different diagrams have different shapes on them. And you know, here's stick figures, and over here is dotted lines. And what's the difference between a dotted line and a solid line? And there's solid arrows and not solid arrows. And so to me, I didn't see that was simplifying anything for me. So the next thing I found that I was doing a lot of as a business analyst was process modeling. And so we had business process, BPMN. Probably a lot of you are familiar with BPMN, and there's even BPMN 2.0 now. Again, it was touted as a standard business process model that forges understanding between business and IT, or business amongst themselves, in a standard notation. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be the answer right here, BPMN. So I started diving into that. And yet what happened was, looking at their specification on the next slide, if you're familiar with BPMN, their specification for version 2.0 is 538 pages. Well, that's great, but the problem is, not only is it me that needs to know this notation, but somehow or other my business partners who I'm working with to get their requirements, they need to understand it too, because the whole purpose of a diagram is to have a shared understanding. But I realized what was happening was, in my meetings with my business, I was spending more time explaining the different boxes and what they meant than I was actually getting their processes, getting their feedback, getting consensus built between business users even. So that was hard too. So I started to have to apologize. Hang on, we're going to take 20 minutes and we're going to learn, what these different boxes mean. And then they ended up never using it ever again. So that's kind of what got me to this place of being like scared and apologetic about the different notations in particular of the modeling that we were doing. So it was scary. But caveat here, and many of you may be, you know, highly technical. You may work with engineers, database admins do a lot of this too. There are times when notation standards are very important. In those kinds of cases, they definitely are. But so just to set the stage, we're really talking about when we're talking with our business users, when we're having conversations on our development teams, you know, what are the diagrams that we need to create there and what are the best ways to go about doing that. So just to let you know, I'm not telling you throw that 538 page manual out the window. You might actually need it. But we're going to focus on what the conversations with our business really need to focus around. So Laura, do you want to talk about this one, or I can talk about this one?
Sure. You can keep going.
I'll keep going. Excuse me. So again, do my business users understand the notations? Well, no. The short answer was they didn't. You know, I was finding myself having to bring, you know, little charts, and the filled in circle means this and the one with the X means that. So really, if they don't know it, how do we deal with it? If they don't know how to use it, if I'm having to teach them how to do it, is not the best use of our time. So think about that when you're sitting in front of your business. So really know your audience. Who are they? What do they do? Why are they doing it? When, how, all of the W questions that we ask. If it's the business, you might be better off not worrying so much about notation. If your audience, however, is engineers, you might have to. So just keep that in mind as we go.
I always think back to one of my early BA classes in a BA bootcamp class, and the instructor said, all you need are boxes and lines with arrows. Keep it simple. And on the previous screen, there's so much notation. And does that really add the value if you can just use boxes and lines? I think everybody understands the boxes and the lines and the arrows.
Absolutely.
But Colleen, how do we get started?
Well, I tell you what I always get started with, and this is whether I'm on my own, needing to understand if I'm jumping into the middle of a project and I need to get a grip on what's going on, or if it's, you know, you're starting a new project and you're trying to see, you know, what's the scope of what I'm working on. I really like to start with a context diagram. And as a matter of fact, when I work with groups of BAs, I usually, especially new ones, this is what I get them started with is, you know, let's do a context diagram. We're not going to worry about the notations so much, but we need to understand what we're really working with here. So in other words, the context diagram is what's the context. Some refer to it as a data flow diagram level 1 or level 0 actually, but we're not going to worry about that today. We're just going to talk about context diagram as it refers to the context or the scope of the work that we need to do. Context diagrams. It's one of my favorite tools, actually. I use it an awful lot, and it is indeed boxes and arrows, just like you'll see on the screen. The middle, this is really the important part. The middle is going to be, that's the work you're working on. That's the thing you're developing, or, you know, maybe it's the name of the project even, maybe it's that high level. And then what the boxes that are around the outside of a context diagram, they're kind of like, what are the handoffs? Who's interacting with this? What are the systems that are affected by this? And then the arrows then depict whether you've got data flowing in and out, what direction the information is flowing. You know, it's not really process diagram because it's not sequential at all. It's really just, here's what we're working on, and here are all the other things that either it touches or touches it. And it's really interesting because I and this was some of the fear. I actually had a peer review where the person reviewing it, I had double headed arrows. So I had an in and an out on the same line. So I had an arrow on each side. And they told me that that was not allowed, that I actually had to put two different arrows, even though it was the exact same thing that was going in and coming back out, transformed perhaps, but going both directions, you know, and I got marked down for that. But the main thing is to get over that is just talk to your users, explain what you're going to do, get their buy-in, and say, you know, this middle thing is going to be the work that we're working on, and everything else around the outside is what either touches it or it touches. It's as simple as that, very high level. But I love it. It really helps clarify things.
And we'll notate down at the bottom, we've got a couple of those rules where you had mentioned earlier, what you're working on goes in the center. And I'll use an example later on. I'll share an example where, you know, I kind of broke that. And also you're supposed to only show the context specifically related to what you're working on. So only one level out. And again, I've broken that too. So it's for the needs of my audience. And that's exactly the point. Here we have some of the questions to ask yourself, you know, is it getting your point across? Is it doing what you need it to do? Is it working for your audience? You know, are you getting the information that you need out of your audience to help get the requirements you need to help your team develop the right solution? Is it leading to a common understanding? I say even if it's wrong, because I have actually put something down and in a quick diagram that I knew was slightly incorrect, because people like to correct other people. People like to show how smart they are. And so it also kind of sparks the conversation when you know that something is slightly incorrect and you know your business partners are going to jump on that and see it. It's going to spark conversation to say like, oh, hey, I caught this, and I see that actually it's like this, and they're going to explain things a little bit more and have more of a conversation, as opposed to coming to the table with something a little bit too perfect, and then it's going to feel like, oh yes, you got it right, it's fine, and then the conversation ends. Sometimes it is actually worthwhile to get something just a little bit wrong to have some of those conversations and dialogue. And so here is actually a context diagram. Doesn't look like what the textbook says. It doesn't look like the screenshot we pulled out of the Babok. But this is actually an example that I used in a project from a few years ago, where the director of that area actually said, draw me a picture. And I was like, I don't know what she's, I can't draw. Like, why is she asking me to draw a picture? Like, I can't draw. And this is by no means the initial attempt. This was probably the 20th or 30th or 50th iteration of getting through, you know, do we have everything? And this kind of delineates, here is what's within the company, here's between the new system, which I couldn't make fit in the center as a circle. And yes, I'm going outside of just the direct interactions with our system. And I'm going out to, this vendor actually interacts with these other vendors, C, D, and E. And, you know, I'm calling out specifically what's out of scope of and in scope for our work. But I do use some double-sided arrows. because I wasn't too concerned necessarily about what those data points were, but I wanted to have that in the picture for the person who wanted to see the picture. And she wanted to see a complete picture. She didn't care that the rules said that it had to be a circle in the center and I could only go one level out. She wanted to see her entire picture. And so this is what ended up being the picture that she needed to see, the complete picture. So it's not following the rules, but it's what we needed to get that common understanding across the entire team. And we have here next an example here. I don't know if we necessarily want to go through and try and do an example, but an example for a context diagram for a self-checkout. We put the self-checkout system here in the center, and if I can figure out how to get the chat pulled up, maybe we can do, you know, what items might be in the boxes. Let me see if I can get it. Let's see. Does anybody have any ideas about, you know, what this self-checkout system, what it might interface with? Or if you'd like to, okay, we've got database coming in, payment system, store inventory. We've got user. Those are some great ideas. I can go to our next screen here. Ooh, rewards program. Yeah. So if I go to our next screen here, we've got a kind of halfway filled out example of, you know, like credit card system, like a membership system or reward system, where, you know, some of the interfaces might be their membership card details, and then whether it comes back, whether it's valid or invalid, credit card system. And some of our ideas were you send the payment card information in and then it getting an authorization status back, and then an inventory system. And then, you know, we had some question marks. We had some, you know, what's next? You know, what else? So we thought, okay, we bring this to our business partners, and neither Colleen nor I have ever worked with self-checkouts or point of sale systems. So we just kind of, from our own personal experience, we're thinking, you know, hey, let's come up with something. And then, you know, intentionally leaving things a bit blank so that we can go to our business partners and say, hey, you know, what's missing? Like I feel like I've missed something. You know, some of you guys called out customers and a scale, that, you know, the weighing of produce and some of these other items. That's a good thought. You know, what else have we forgotten? What have we missed? That sort of thing. And then we've got our next type of diagram here.
My
I think Colleen's ready to take
type.
things away.
Yes, it's my second favorite type, process modeling. We do this a lot, I think, as business analysts, because a lot of times what we're looking at is a process that needs improvement, or we have a process that we need to apply a tool for, right? So these probably look familiar. These are BPMN, I believe, notation. And they're good, but you know, in this, like, what does the solid line mean on the third? Is that, you know, does that mean we're going into parallel tasks? How long does it take me to explain that to our business partner? Would my business partner even think that there's a parallel process going on? So during those initial conversations, you know, you don't necessarily need to get to this level of detail and notation. You might need to later, but for the moment, you really don't. And the coolest thing about process modeling, I think, is you can do it in many different mediums, right? You can do a whiteboard share online. You can do, my favorite one is just to get whiteboard. Like I even have a personal size. This is how much of a geeky BA I am. I have my own personal whiteboard sitting under my desk for when I need it for emergency process modeling purposes. But what I really like to do is either for myself, maybe I have something. So I had a process where we were putting in a visitor check-in space for some of our offices. And so this was my own personal process. What I needed to do was, make sure the users got set up. So I got my little sticky notes. I didn't know what order they needed to go in yet. So I need to get my users set up. So I'd write it on a sticky note, stick it on my whiteboard. I need to actually set up the facility in the application itself. So some app setup, I'd put that on there. Oh, I need to order the hardware. I forgot. I need to do that too. So I'd put that up on the board, and then I don't know if you probably can't even see, but I have these little arrows that then I would just figure out what order to go in. And what's really great about sticky notes is you can just pick them up and move them. You don't have to erase, which I don't like doing on a whiteboard because then if you don't use the eraser, you get the ink all over your hands. But you can just stick them up on your board. And here's a pro tip for you. And I do this as often as I can. You don't even necessarily have to do this work yourself. You get your business users to do it. If you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you can be on site in person with your business users, or if you do, it takes a little bit of getting used to, especially for your business, but the whiteboards on all of the conferencing software, I think a lot of people are getting more used to that now. That sharing, you get them to do it. You say, hey, put each of the steps of your process on a sticky note and stick it up on this board, and have everybody in your group do that. Take 5 minutes to do that, or give them some time to write them up and then go up to the board and stick them all on there. And then have them stand around the whiteboard and move them around into the order that they agree on is the correct order. So they've done your work for you, and all you've done is gotten to be entertained by all of the little chit chat and everything that's going on, and you've learned a lot yourself, but you didn't actually have to make the process model. They did it for you. And I know in Nova Scotia, you guys might not follow American football at all, but the Chicago Bears had a TV show on about their process of new rookie football players. And I swear to you, the coaches are standing around a whiteboard with sticky notes on it, deciding who they're going to cut and who they're going to keep. And so that's another thing you can just do with a whiteboard and sticky notes is maybe you just say, have a column for cut and keep, and you can move your sticky notes around. And it's low tech. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You're not committing a lot of resources. Whiteboard, sticky notes, arrows. I love to do my process models this way.
I will reshare our screen.
I was like, I got bigger all of a sudden.
You did. I stopped sharing and you got spotlit.
I got spotlit. I love it. I love the conferencing features. They've gotten so much better since, I don't know, however long we've been using them, 10, 15 years.
Well, I don't personally use the sticky note method. I have a lot of sticky notes. Maybe if I tried harder at it and, tried getting my business partners engaged in it, maybe it would be a little bit more successful for me. But what I tend to do is, since I get a bit of writer's block, you open up a tool and like right now I'm sharing a blank screen. Oh, the writer's block, the pressure. I draw a blank. I'm like, I don't know anything about this process. How do I get started? I actually get started on, like a piece of paper, and then, start thinking about, okay, this is about doing a meeting and getting a meeting scheduled, kind of a meeting like this, and, deciding on the topics and this sort of thing. And, getting it out of my brain and down on a piece of paper. Yeah, I didn't bother trying to erase or make it perfect or recopy it. I had stuff down, and then I was like, hey, I'll put this down into an actual tool and then draw it out. And this is the process of, what we had to do for an IIBA meeting before the new chapter backend system was implemented for our chapter websites a couple months back. So there was a lot of running manual reports and doing all this and then sending manual thank you for attending meeting, stuff like that. So there's a lot better ways of doing things. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of another form of fear, which is stage fright. So if you're a lot of times, I don't know if this happens to you guys at all, but like it happens to me in Excel all the time. If I'm sharing my screen and I get scared that I'm going to mess up, but especially like with a tool, right? If you're trying to do a tool, say Visio or whatever you're using, if you're trying to do that in front of people, sometimes you get stuck with, oh my gosh, you automatically get a brain block because you kind of got stage fright. So when you use the sticky notes or the piece of paper, you get your users to stand up and doing it, you're taking that element of fear out of it as well, because everybody's familiar with paper. And then you can go back by yourself someday and not have to worry about the stage fright and put it in a tool like this.
We had a placeholder here for doing an exercise, but I think we will go ahead and skip this. Let's see. But we essentially went through and did kind of a the same sort of example. But moving on to our next type of diagram, timelines and roadmaps. So which would you rather see? A bulleted list of dates or a paragraph of dates, or some type of a graphical view where you can see those dates in a graphical format where it makes sense to see, oh, okay, and here's how things flow along. It's a little bit easier to read that way. I am not a history person. That is the, throw a bunch of dates at me. I'm not going to remember them. I'm going to get them wrong if you quiz me on them later. But if you put it in a slightly different format, it might be easier for me to remember how to, what those dates are, if it's a little prettier, if it's a little easier to consume. And also, this sort of timeline is a lot easier for your executive partners. They get a lot of information thrown at them. How can we make it easier for them to consume your information? This example here is from a piece of legislation that is very US specific, and I was going to use this later on as examples for the decision table tool, but I switched gears for this and we'll use a different example for decision tables, and we're gonna have a little fun with it. But timelines, you can even make things a bit prettier. And here's an example that I got from an email from Peacock. And, this was a little while ago, so this was way before the Olympics. But this is, something that basically explains, you could correlate this to a project that you're working on. It explains, some of the milestones. There's a rowing competition, there's a rowing trial, and there's different things, different events going on, different milestones in your project. And this type of a timeline diagram or graphic could become part of your product marketing material, and used in more official communications, product launch materials. This one looks like a postcard. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cute, but it can be used for more than just its original purpose.
And it's memorable, right? Because it's cute. So, people are going to remember this. And we do this, like Laura said, we do this a lot with our current marketing internal marketing, oddly enough, of a ERP system that we're implementing over the next 3 years. Our monthly updates come with something pretty graphic like this so that it can just be memorable, so people keep it top of mind.
The next tool is roadmaps. So very similar to the timelines, but that roadmap can be a little bit more general. I like this one because this is less constrained to commitment to a particular quarter. I generally have to do quarterly roadmaps and kind of line out, here's what activities we're doing. And I love this one from Kent McDonald of now, next, later. And he's got a column for never. Here's what we've agreed that we're just not going to do. And I love that. Like a lot of that, their underlying assumptions, and maybe you never state them out loud. But here he's just got a column for him, and he's calling it out right there. We're just not going to do these, H, L, M. We're just not going to do these. But working on this one now, here's what's coming up next. Then later on, here's the rest of the top priority items in our backlog. And here's what we're just not going to do. So
I like that too, because that takes out the fear of saying no, right?
Mhm.
You have a roadmap like this, and then the business comes to expect that, yeah, things are going to land and never. And it doesn't have to be on you to say, we're not going to do that. And then, all kinds of fear and ramifications of saying no sometimes to our business. So I like that this takes that. It takes out the apologies too, because we all agreed on it. It's here.
I may actually experiment with this for my next roadmap and see if I can do these columns now, next, later, and never, and see if I can get away with it. I think I'm going to have to be slightly more specific with, now and next, and maybe I can say later, and be a little bit more general about when kind of those farther out items are coming up. But we'll see. Maybe I can utilize some of this, next, just in the next couple days or weeks. And then moving on to the next type of diagram. I came upon decision tables, I'll say relatively recently, just in the last, I'll say few years. And it is a type of diagram used for decision modeling. And, it can show a lot of information in a very concise way. It can be used to ensure that you've got a complete set of requirements, because in that diagram, it will very clearly show where you've got a gap, where something's missing, or maybe where something needs a little bit more clarity. And, it's a little easier to communicate than a very long list of a lot of requirements. But let's kind of dive in. How might we get started with an example? So here is one of the examples in the Babok, and it's got a list of eligibility rules for loans based on age and loan amount. And so what we've got on the left side of the chart is those inputs. So the age of the customer and the loan amount. And then these are the rules that they use to determine whether someone is considered eligible for this loan or not. And then I went through and said, basically, I'm going to write this out in words. So, if the loan amount is less than or equal to 1,000, then go on to the user's age and defining all of this. The traditional way over here on this left side, that's a lot to read. I wrote it, and I definitely don't want to go back and reread it. And looking at this as I was rewriting it, I was like, well, what do we do about exactly 1,000? Here it says less than or equal. Here it says 1,000 again. So where does 1,000 fall? So I kind of rewrote it to be 1,001. But this is a lot of stuff to read. If you put it over here in the chart, it feels like it's easier to consume. And I've done a good bit of reading in a couple of different books and online articles and stuff about visual models and decision tables. And, I called this one rules. So this book, Visual Models for Software Requirements, in this book, they kind of outline like, here's the rules for a decision table. And I kind of go, okay, thank you for the rules. Appreciate that. I'll take that under advisement and see what I can make work. Here in this chart, they say X means one thing, having a number there means another. If it's a dash, it means it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. If you leave it blank, we don't know, that sort of thing. And so I'm just like, interesting, but it's more of a guideline than an actual rule. I've used this technique and transformed it into a bit of a capability matrix. So this is a screenshot from one of my product requirements documents that I've kind of generalized into just a list of features 1 through 12 and broke it out into populations, and then whether the group is salaried or hourly. And then, I've got whether it's a green check mark or a red X, or maybe it's got something about a subset of those people. So need to elaborate. You can't just answer it just in this chart, need to elaborate on that subset and those rules with some text. But I've called it out here, and this technique has seemed to work out well with all these different features and who gets it, rather than using paragraphs upon paragraphs of words that a lot of times people don't want to read that much. And the chart here is a bit easier to consume. And here's another example where you can kind of see that somebody's got a lot of work to do. There's some blanks in there, and there's a couple of TBDs where I acknowledged, hey, to be determined, and some blanks like, hey, I just don't know whether it should be a check mark or an X or what the answer is. So I just left it blank. Some of the others, it's like, hey, I truly know that I don't know, so I just put TBD. I have like a real world example that we can dive into. Was anybody watching the Olympics this past summer? I certainly enjoyed it, and fashion at the Olympics. And I'm gonna say specifically with gymnastics. Right now, we got the folks here wearing their warm-up or cool-down suits. But the question of what can you wear when? Generally, you see the male gymnast half the time wearing one thing and half the time wearing something different. And you're often left wondering, what can you wear when? So on the rings, you're supposed to wear the long pants. And similarly with parallel bars, again, that's a long pants kind of thing. And with the high bar, again, long pants. Then we move over to the vault, and they're wearing shorts. As well as on the floor exercise, again, shorts. And then over on the pommel horse, we're back to the long pants. Which the question came up with some folks like, are they wearing footy pajamas? And no, they are actually stirrup pants that, oftentimes they are wearing the same color socks as the pants. But here you can see Ireland, they wore white socks with green pants. So you can tell like, hey, it's different color, or it's two different pieces. And of course, you know, as a BA, I asked why. Why are they wearing different things? One reason is a safety issue. Less likely to catch their hands on the fabric when it's a long pant and they're doing rings or pommel horse or these types of things, as well as scoring. It's easier to tell how much your knees are bent. So, and again, here I included down here at the bottom the link to one of the many articles about fashion and men's gymnastics. You know, are they really wearing footy pajamas? But I kind of went through and from all of those pictures, wrote down a list of business rules, how I saw them for each of the different events. So like in the pictures we saw, must wear shorts for vault, shorts for floor exercise, pants for high bar, pants for parallel bars, rings, and pommel horse. And again, I like to write things out on a quick piece of paper. So I just wrote it out, and this is a quick decision table. You know, it has the event, and in this example, I did columns for shorts versus pants, and then just did a yes versus a no, and kind of had that as a first draft. And talking about women's fashion, a couple years ago for the 2020 Olympic Games, I saw for the first time women wearing unitards. And I was thinking, hey, is that allowed? It is. And Germany was the first and only time that I've actually seen them wearing unitards instead of the leotard. But I was like, well, let's incorporate the women's fashion into a decision table that covers both women and men. And this is what I came up with. So, you know, having the different conditions here on the left-hand side, and then outcomes here, I put in the men's column, whether it was the shorts or the pants, also known as longs. And for women, you know, basically they can wear either the leotard or a unitard. And I put NA for the ones that they don't compete in. So men don't do the balance beam or uneven bars, and women don't do any of the last 4 events. And so I was like, well, that's one way of showing it. And on the next slide, I've got another way of doing it, of showing all the different conditions across the top, including men, women, all the different events, and then having the outcome or results on the very far side. And to me, that's a lot of information in that table. And so I did another version thinking, you know, it would be a little easier to see it without all the no's. So I just went with, okay, here's the 6 for the men, and then showed, here's all the yeses. And then the attire is, you know, same thing. So floor and vault are your shorts. And then every other of the events for men, they wear the pants. And then same thing for the females. The 4 exercises or the 4 events they compete in, it's the leotard or unitard. And so that's kind of my fun representation of different decision tables. And then here is our summary and question slide. We have talked about various types of pictures and knowing your audience and how we appreciate rules, but we like to bend them or break them when it's appropriate. And we introduce several types of diagrams, context diagrams, process models, timelines and roadmaps, and decision tables. And now we can start looking at some questions. All right.
Wow, 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 wow. This is absolutely incredible. Colin, you want to continue? Okay.
I'm good. I'm ready for questions.
Okay, so please, questions. If you have any question, you can either raise your hand or you drop your questions in the chats. I've really learned a lot tonight. I want to believe other people too have learned what a simplified way of representing BPMN, the modeling for the business process modeling notation is a kind of complex. Okay, yes, Ellen. Ellen has a question. Please go for it.
Hi, thank you. So I really enjoyed the presentation. It opened my eyes to a lot more of what's available. My question's more, and people probably who've been here before will get sick of me asking this question, which is, I'm a new BA and I don't have any training or certification in being a BA, so I'm kind of like learning on the job. So my question is that where would there be what are some credible resources that you would recommend for someone like myself when I'm faced with a situation? I'm like, I need to present something and I'm not sure what might be best.
So Laura has a slide, I think, an appendix that actually has some.
I do have quite a few items in the appendix. I actually,
okay.
yeah, for the decision tables, I went a different direction. And since we were doing stuff for Canada, I put fun stuff in here too. So different quotes about rules, and, breaking them, but also, general resources. So the Babok version 3, Guide to the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge. I pulled a lot of like core basic information from the Babok in order to pull and put in here. So talking about process modeling and context diagrams, decision tables, most of that was pulled from the Babok. Visual models for software requirements. I haven't read it cover to cover. It's more of one of those, like, you don't sit down and read a dictionary or an encyclopedia necessarily, but it's a good reference. And I like to pick it up where, okay, how can I draw a picture, or how can I make a picture to represent something, to represent what I'm working on? And it's helped me with role and permission matrix, as well as, decision tables, and teaching me rules so I know what I'm breaking when I go forward and start to break the rules.
I'm going to give a big shout out for the Mastering Business Analysis Standard Practices from Kelly Bruns and Billy Johnson. Billy Johnson was a real big mentor for me in my BA life. And Kelly, they were business partners, I guess, you could say, for a while. Their book is really on how to keep it simple, like we were talking about, and how to cut through a lot of that noise, and get to really what you need to get to the basics, like keep it simple, do just the amount of work that you need to do, get your audience involved, knowing your audience a lot. And Aline, I can tell you that, welcome to the role of a BA. It's a really cool experience. And I would encourage you to, don't be afraid, because you'll get things wrong. But how, like Laura was saying earlier, sometimes being wrong is a good thing, because you do spark those conversations and you do get the people talking. And that's really what we want to do, is get your business people talking to each other and to you, more so than you making a presentation to them and them just nodding and saying yes. So don't be afraid. I was afraid for a long time, and I'm not afraid anymore.
Wow, thank you so much for those beautiful answers. So Eileen, I believe that answered your question.
No, I was going to say thank you very much as well. I see there's lots of questions in the chat, so I can talk all day. So I'm just going to.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions in the chat. So one is from Sandra. How do you get your management or customer to slow down in order to do the diagram that proves to be very beneficial. I know Laura was telling us to get them in. Oh, okay, it was Colin that we should engage our business. They can even do it for you. So how do you get them to slow down and actually walk the journey with you?
I'm still trying to figure that out. So maybe Colleen can teach me.
I don't know. I mean, that's hard. But I mean, I do it a lot because I went from I actually worked at Walmart before, so I went from sort of a retail world to what I do now, which is poultry and pet food manufacturing. So it's completely different worlds, right? And I knew nothing about manufacturing when I started, and so really, again, not apologizing for it, but just saying, hey, I really need to understand. I don't know, treat me like I'm 6, or just tell them, I'm going to ask you why 50 times. Just know that I'm not challenging you. I just need to know. Just a lot of that has to do with knowing your audience too, because a lot of times, I don't know, if you're talking, I'm thinking senior VP, you're not going to say, hey, talk to me like I'm in kindergarten, right? But you do want to demonstrate that, you're really seeking to understand. And you'll find that at some point, maybe not right away, but maybe the second time you meet, they will enjoy sharing their knowledge with you and will be more than happy to be the smartest person in the room for a moment, right? So if you have to feed their ego, maybe that's the way you need to go, but it is hard to get them to slow down. Getting them involved physically, if you can, in person, is a good way to do it. If that's possible, have them write the stuff down and put it up on the board. That gives them, more of their senses a chance to engage.
Yeah, thank you so much, Colleen. I believe that answers your question, Sandra. So give them a heads up. We're going to be asking them lots of questions. And it all boils down to knowing your audience, know who you are engaging. Thank you so much. I think that's very, very important. The other question I have here is from John. John said, any advice on how to highlight items of emphasis in a diagram without it getting rapidly cluttered? For example, a process diagram where some steps have extra business rules applied.
My first thought would be maybe take those business rules out of the process flow and have them somewhere separate. I know it might be the first thought of capturing everything in that process flow, but those business rules, maybe have them in a separate Word document or Excel document. Similar to how I mean, it's a funny example to laugh at now, but my business rule list of, gymnasts must wear shorts for this event, shorts for this event, pants for this one, I had them numbered, and we can refer back to them from other requirements documentation, like a process flow. But maybe that's where you take out those business rules to unclutter the diagram.
I know that some tools will also have like a off-page reference. I know you can do that in Visio, where you can put in another page, and then on your box you could put the link to the other page. That's a good way to keep it uncluttered. Just refer the clutter to the next page. You can do it that way. I mean, yeah, with if you've got a great big room that you're working in with a lot of whiteboards or a lot of flip charts, you can always move them to a different flip chart, that kind of thing. But yeah, I like that question, and I'm going to think about that more, because that's a really good point.
Thank you. So the point is keeping it simple. You can decouple it. Just break it down to the smallest part that they can understand. Thank you so much for that insight. And I do have another question here. Says, I think that's from Ola. Ola is asking, apart from Visio, Lucid Charts, what other tools do you use in diagramming?
So for some of the diagrams earlier in the presentation, I actually used an add-on to Confluence, which is, I believe, an Atlassian product. Jira and Confluence are, and it was a something that you can add on to a Confluence page through draw.io. So the tool is actually called draw.io. And so I was kind of experimenting with that. It was kind of my ulterior motive. So I was doing a diagram and also let me play with this tool and see if it's easier. It's about the same,
About the same.
amount of difficulty, and sometimes you got to fight with the arrows to be exactly right and stuff like that. But I often use Visio. I have used Lucidchart, but my company's moved away from it, so it's kind of like, well, I can't use it anymore. But those are the main ones: Visio, Lucidchart, and this Draw.io tool that we have access to now.
You know what I use a lot? I use PowerPoint.
That too, you
The
know,
shapes.
sometimes.
I use the shapes in PowerPoint a lot, and most people have PowerPoint, and most people know how to use PowerPoint. So I actually use PowerPoint.
Thank you. So you can use whatever is convenient and comfortable for you. The most important is get the job done.
Right.
Thank you so much. And I do have a couple more questions looking at our time. So a question for Stephanie. How do you address accessibility for process diagrams?
We've actually had that question before. I think I need to do a little bit more research into that. We talked about the last time the question came up, if you're doing like boxes and arrows, you know, well, first of all, you don't want to do color coding. I work with a guy who is colorblind, and so you know, when I work with him, I'm aware that, you know, that's a struggle for him. So instead of using like this color and that color, we'll use like bold font, italics font, you know, things like that. Patterns, yes, patterns. Thank you, Sandra. Patterns, very very good method of accessibility. Yes, I lost that word accessibility, and it's right there on the screen.
Thank you. I think those are, okay, yes, I think that's all the questions I can see for now. And please, if you have any other question, if you can just probably raise your hand so that I can unmute you, or you still drop it. And have you found cases where you've been able to clone or use the same kind of diagram on different projects?
When it comes to reuse, I think what we kind of showed you about timelines and roadmaps is they're highly reusable. You know, especially across teams. So like if we needed a timeline for something that we're working on, we might pass it over to the accounting department, say, who we're working on it with. And then so they'll use that in communicating with their customers, or they'll use it to communicate up to their management type of thing. But yeah, I mean, boxes and arrows are really easy to use. So you know, if you do have similar things that you're working on, you could definitely create some templates maybe, or just do copy and paste for your next effort.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Functional decomposition is really useful too. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Steven, yeah. Question.
Oh, Miro. Yeah, I see somebody mentioned Miro. Miro is a good tool too.
Yeah. Okay, so Blinder, okay. I see so many other suggestions here. All right, I want to believe we've been able to cover most of the questions that we have here. So please, you can just drop your emoji, appreciating Colin and Laura tonight for coming to share their wealth of experience, their wealth of knowledge with us. This is highly, highly appreciated. Please drop your emoji, say a big thank you. We want to appreciate you so much for
Thank
sharing your
you.
knowledge with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. This will be available. Okay, some people were asking if your slides will be shared.
Sure.
Is there any
Yes.
possibility?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. So they have, okay, so they've agreed to share their slide with us. So once that is being shared with us, we are going to share it with everybody via the email you used to register for this program. So thank you so much, everyone. I believe this has been a valuable use of your time. Awesome. And it is never wasted. I want to wish you a wonderful night, depending on your location. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And here on the screen, you can see this for our YouTube page. This should be uploaded on the YouTube page for you to be able to go back to it after now. So I think we can end it today. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and do enjoy the rest of your day.